Hey everyone, welcome to CraftQuest on Call. This is episode number 26, where we are going to answer your questions, as we always do, and talk a little bit about bugs. It is July 1st, and here in Austin, Texas, this is when all of the creepy crawlies come alive and try to slither into every crack and hole in your house or apartment. That's when you have to smash them down, hunt them down. But we're not going to actually talk about those kind of bugs. We're going to talk about the kind of bugs in your code, and we're going to talk a little bit about debugging. It's going to be a theme of July. But before we get to that, I have to introduce my beloved, esteemed co-host, the future president of the United Federation of Craft Developers, Mr. Andrew Welch. Hello, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing
You're
good.
scaring me with that little intro about creepy crawlies and what's going on?
Yeah, like I don't know how it is in New York where you are, but it takes until about June-ish for the creepy callers to really come out in full force. So
I will say that on my hikes about this time of year, I start to get extra protein, shall we say? I'm going on the hikes by swallowing some of the bugs as I'm going.
yeah,
And they fly up your nose, and that's a wonderful experience too. Yeah.
and we had a deep freeze here in Austin in February, and I'm actually surprised that we have any insects at all. But plenty of
Isn't
mosquitoes.
the country on fire though? Isn't most of the country on fire, or is it just the Pacific Northwest with
Like
their heat
metaphorically
domes, man?
speaking, or just actually literally?
Literally.
Oh, I don't know if are there a lot. I know there's a heat wave out on the Pacific Northwest for sure.
Yeah, somewhere in Canada, in Victoria, BC, apparently it was 49 degrees Celsius. This is insane.
Yeah, so I was looking at the temperatures in Bend, Oregon, where the Pixel and Tonic team are headquartered, and I think it was like 105 or something like that. Like that's even here in Austin, we'd be like, whoa. 105.
I mean, it's not, we have days like that over the summer where it's going to be like that, but I think they're not used to it. But especially in Vancouver,
Yeah.
I don't think they're used to 120 degrees is insane.
Here's the thing. The
what it
temps
is.
I was looking at in Bend, but they went down to like 60 at night. It dropped like 40 something degrees
Yeah.
at night, which is what I remember growing up in New Jersey, is that if it was a hot day, like in the, high 80s or whatever, that at night, like you could open the windows up and just be washed with cool evening air. That doesn't happen here in Austin. Here in Austin, like you could go out at 3 a.m. and it'll be like 81 degrees.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would love. I don't know. I mean, 81 is not terrible, but they're definitely like. I remember we drove through Death Valley, New Mexico, which holds the record in the U.S. for the hottest temperature or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember we were in the Plymouth Horizon with air conditioning that just was a joke. Like it wouldn't even work. But if you rolled down the windows, it was literally like opening an oven door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get the blast of heat when you open the oven door. Fun fact, Ryan, that is it. The one time that I got sunburn on the bottom of my feet. Yes.
Oh, okay. From walking on like concrete or something like that?
No, I had my feet hanging out the window as we're driving along, and I fell asleep, and I got sunburn. It's one of the worst places you can get sunburn. You can't walk.
Can't
awful.
walk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's no good. Yeah.
Wear sunscreen, especially if you're like me. So Andrew, I didn't do the full-on hair thing for today.
I'm pretty disappointed in you. I mean, I got to let everyone know
Go ahead.
that, I'm a professional, right? So we're getting ready to go here. I make sure that this thing is all sleeked up,
Yeah.
I don't have much to work with, but what I work with, I try to make it presentable. I even send Ryan the gear.
You did.
The gear that he needs in order
You
to
sent
not
me
look
a 3-part
looking.
system. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can look more teacher and less meth addict. And you don't do it. You don't do it. What's
yesterday
going on?
I did do a fresh, like, no guard buzz. And then I was going to do the full on thing. And then I didn't have any shaving cream. And and I didn't have a lot of time, so I decided to
The
pause.
thing I sent you, you don't use shaving cream with it, man.
No, it says you're supposed to do it wet though to help preserve
You
the.
you don't need shaving cream though. You just dip it in water as you go. You don't
All right,
use water. You don't,
I'll work on that, and for next time. It's a really
unbelievable.
the thing you sent is really nice, and you kind of sit it like over your fingers, like you kind of do one of.
Yeah.
It's actually quite nice.
Yeah, and you do it,
Yeah.
like you're polishing a floor. It doesn't do it in one thing. It's not like a razor where you can just go like that and it'll do it.
Right.
You gotta,
You gotta
you
work.
circle it around and
Yeah.
you gotta work it and massage it and do what you gotta do.
And this isn't Ryan and Andrew's hair care segment, but
I think we should start like a YouTube. We get the ring lights. We can start like I don't know. I think we could do it.
hey guys, are you looking for the shiniest of shines on your head? Well, I have got it here for you. What do you think? It's a good. I got like the whole hey guys thing too.
Healthquest.io, baby.
Hell, I own all the quests. Not Andrew Quest. I need to get that. So Andrew, we're gonna answer a couple questions from that were sent in, and if you're watching live and you're in the chat and you have a question as we talk, go ahead and drop those in. We're happy to answer them. It's a little quiet in the chat right now, from what I see. Oh, there's okay, Andrew wrote in the chat. So, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, I mentioned it in the intro, Andrew. We're going to talk a little bit about debugging, and it's going to be a theme for the next month or so. And we'll come back around to it again, and you'll hear more from me on CraftQuest about debugging as well. How's
More
that
like
sound?
a theme for the rest of your life if this is your business, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to get good at using debugging tools to find why things are working, or as we're going to show later, maybe find out how things work.
Yeah.
All right. So let's first go to one of our questions, Andrew. And let me pull these up here. So the first one is from Benito. And so the other day, maybe it was yesterday, I sent out a tweet and said you got to try to stump us with your questions. So someone sent one in and says, so you want to be stumped? And Benito says, Craft 3 checks license info against a system known as CraftNet. Craft 2 had a service called ET to check license info. And Benito asks, what or who did ET phone home to? All right, Andrew, go ahead. Initially, kind of summarize the general, what you understand of like the licensing as well, like how it works.
Yeah, so I mean, basically what it's doing is rather than keeping whatever license validation that you would want done on a license in the product itself, it basically pings a server and says, here's the license, tell me about the status of it. And this is the way to do it, right? Many years ago, we had a renewal server that worked a very similar way. And the idea is that you want to be able to have a back-end private database that can do whatever validation it needs to do on the license, and then return a result to the client that says, this is valid, this is a pro license, this is that, whatever. And that will also allow them to have their back-end system where people can manage their licenses and et cetera, et cetera. So initially, in Craft 2, as he mentioned, it was called ET, that then, quote unquote, phoned home to the service to get the result. And now the thing that it now dials into, I don't know if the service is called ET anymore, but what it calls into now is called CraftNet, which is it's a reference to Terminator, the CraftNet that took over. And I do know the answer. So I initially read this question and I'm like, oh, that's a good one. And then I just remembered it out of the blue. I didn't look up anything at all. I know the answer to this. Do you want to take a shot at it before I tell you what it is? Because I know what it is.
No. You go ahead.
All right. Elliot is what they called their thing running. Because Elliot was the kid that E.T. had the bond with. Yeah.
But E.T. didn't phone home to Elliot, though.
That's what they called it, man. I'm not saying it makes 100% sense, but that's what it was called. ET was the service, and Elliot was their back end system that was running and doing the stuff on the back end. I'm gonna give it like a 95% certainty is my rating that I'm gonna give that. And if Benito, if he is listening and find out that I'm wrong, like tell me. I'm pretty sure that that's right though.
So Benito, you did not stump Andrew.
Well, maybe.
Well, maybe he's completely wrong.
I don't think so though. I'm pretty sure I'm right. Yeah.
Maybe he's completely wrong. Yeah. Great. All right. Awesome. And everybody's familiar with, if you bought a license for Craft or for a plugin, you log into your id.craftcms.com. You can kind of see like the customer facing end of CraftNet where the licenses are managed.
Right.
All right.
And then you can transfer licenses, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. The next question is, dearest Andrew. Actually, it doesn't say that. But the person asks, how do you create a custom module? So we covered this a long time ago. I was actually looking back at some of our old episodes or live streams that we did all the way back to when you were like sitting down and it looked like you were barely paying attention to me as we were live streaming. Well,
in fairness, it's probably because I was looking at the screen,
right,
and focusing on what I was doing. Now you're used to me making the eye contact.
I know,
right? Now you like it, right?
Right before we went live, we were talking about how much nicer your whole video streaming setup has become.
That's not exactly what we're talking about. What I was actually talking about was how much money that Ryan has cost me by bringing me on this program. I've just spent so much money in AV equipment. Like, it's just so dumb. But it's become like it's weird, man. It's like a hobby or an obsession or whatever it is. But I mean, it is a bottomless pit. Like I was telling you the other day, I was searching around for a solution for something. And I saw the prices were creeping into the thousands of dollars. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to close the browser window and walk away quietly.
Yeah.
Because some of this professional equipment, man, is super pricey.
Yeah. I found myself, like, without even thinking, looking up. What was I looking up? Like lights or something like that. And I was like, what are you doing? I have like a whole closet full of lighting gear. Like, I don't need any more lighting. I don't know why. But anyway.
You really only need 2, maybe 3 lights to have a decent lighting setup. Yeah.
Right. And a little bit of understanding of generally how they work.
And lots of patience, because lots and lots of trial and error and this, that, and the other thing. And I still haven't gotten the color balance to where I would like it to be.
Same.
I don't know.
Same.
I'm just going to appear like a pink Thanos. That's fine. I'm good.
And I'll appear like I haven't eaten protein in 40 years. All right. So where were we? Custom module.
Yeah. Custom module.
Custom module. All right. So let me share my screen, Andrew. So this is just the CraftQuest project. And so every Craft installation comes with a modules directory. Can everyone see that okay?
Looks good to me.
All right. And inside of there is a module.php file, which is just like a starter module for creating your own custom module. So the good news is that there's already a module there. It doesn't do anything. It's not even bootstrapped. I don't think it's bootstrapped by default. Let's see. So the bootstrap part is right here in modules. Usually it comes with this commented out like that. So the steps to creating your own custom module, and really I'm kind of giving you like the framework because there was no details of like what you want to do, but we can kind of briefly talk about that too. So you want to make sure that you're bootstrapping the module, you're just giving it some sort of name and that matches here and that it's pointing to the right class. And it should be by default out of the box. Try it on a brand new installation of Craft. It should work. And then in your modules directory, your module.php file, which is just this class file for a module, it will typically come with code that everything like this won't be there. It'll basically just be this set alias and then the parent init and a bunch more comments. And that's all there will be there. So what you can do, go ahead.
No, I'm gonna let you finish.
I was gonna say what you can do just to get started, just to see what happens, is if in your app.php file, if you uncomment the bootstrap here, so that basically means that every time the Craft application runs, it basically loads that module as well. So the code that's in there is available and it runs. So if you do that, and then in this module, if you just, you can even like dump and die something, or just, I don't know if echoing something out will work or not. I haven't tried that. But you can do something like just silly like that, just to see if it catches. Or you can do something we're gonna talk about in a minute, which is if you're already using a debugger, you can set a breakpoint there. Where can I set a breakpoint? You can set a breakpoint and see if it actually gets called. Oh, I was trying to set it on an empty line. That's why. Okay. So
can't break on an empty line, Ryan.
Doesn't work.
No.
So that's the first part. Now the second part is, what do you want the module to do? And then that's where honestly I think the hard work comes in, because it could really be complex or it could be simple depending.
So I would not recommend that you do it this way. What I would recommend you do is I would recommend that you go to pluginfactory.io and that you generate the module code there. And there's a reason for that.
Why do you recommend that over what's already in Craft? Because
there are lots of things that you're going to want to do that the stub that comes with Craft doesn't do for you. And lots of little things that it doesn't set up for you, like template roots, like controller namespaces, and et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that if you're doing anything of substance, I think it is much, much easier to get all the scaffolding and then fill it in with what you want.
Okay.
And if you go ahead and generate it, and then you can open it up and you can see what's in there. Check a couple of things. Like maybe you want a console command, a controller.
We'll do twig extensions. Are pretty common.
Put a console command in there too, because that's a pretty common use case, as well as they'll have some kind of special service that they'll want. What I do for every site that I make is every site that I make has a site module baked into it. Most of the time it does nothing, right? It just sits there, does nothing, no big deal. But the reason I do that is inevitably when you do want to add some little bit of functionality, it's so nice to just have the scaffolding there that is good to go. Right. So here, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see, for instance, it's setting up an alias for you that otherwise you wouldn't be able to use. It's setting up your controller namespace for you. It's setting up your localization, where if you ever want to have any strings in here that need to be translated, there you go. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see where it's adding the template roots as well. So if you have templates that you want to render, that's all going to work. So it's a bunch of just like boilerplate stuff, but it's stuff you're almost always going to want to do in your module. Like you're almost always going to want to have a controller somewhere. You're almost, you know what I mean? And I think it just makes sense to just have this scaffolding there. And also you can see a working thing with, full on controllers and console commands and all that kind of stuff. And then you can just make whatever adjustments that you need to from there. I would highly recommend that you do that. I mean, most of the questions that I see where people are extending Craft and they have questions about stuff, a lot of them are coming from where people are starting from zero. And it's really hard to start from zero because you don't know what magic incantation you need to do, just to get some of the basic stuff in there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So for what it's worth, that's what I would recommend.
So there's one thing I like about, or a few things I like about your recommendation. And one is like that general setup, because I think that especially people that are new to this can be tripped up by namespaces and just kind of
Yep.
getting everything named properly so it all works. And that can be a little
Yep.
tedious to hunt down if you're not used to how it works.
That is the whole reason I created Plugin Factory to begin with. I made it for Craft 2 because I was just so annoyed because if you didn't get the casing just right on certain things and I mean, it was just irritating things that really the computer should do for you, right?
Right.
You should be focused on the higher level problem. You shouldn't be focused on, is this particular thing camel cased or whatever. So that's the whole reason I wrote it to begin with, is I was just sick of like having these silly errors where this isn't working because it's lowercase where it should be uppercase or whatever. So use a computer to do the boilerplate stuff, the stuff that computers are good at, to give you that type of thing. And then fill in the logic from there where you add the value,
So if the question asker, I don't have the person's name in front of me, asked like detailed what they were trying to do, I think it would then influence how I would instruct them to go. So as an example, just to go back to the code, in the case of something where you just want to hook into a single event and just do something very simple, I don't see any reason why you can't just use the simplest of module class files and just do that and then be done. Disagree with me?
Well, I just here the place where I disagree with you, and maybe I'm just being paranoid, is that it always starts with that. Right? It always starts with, oh, I just need to do this one thing. In computers, it never ends with that. Like clients can be like, oh, I need to do this, or oh, I didn't understand the requirements fully, I need to do that. And then you got to pull this thing in, and then you're like, oh, my shit's broken, it doesn't work. How do I put the namespace in here? And you're like, man, I should have just started with a full scaffolding and be done with it.
Okay, so I would say one thing that I think that where that would make a lot of sense is what a lot of people do with modules is they have like if you're doing client work, you have like a client module where the project has like a module that has client specific business logic in it, right? And so that may grow as the project goes. So like you say, you probably want to get all of your base stuff in there and just go from there. So I get that.
And it's also a Rumsfeld thing, right? It's like an unknown unknowns kind of thing where it's always the case when you're working on these projects where all right, sure, you give them a quote for what the project is going to be, and let's just face it, we're all lying. Like it's just a really experienced lying, because we don't know exactly what it's going to take to do it. And it's the nature of the business. It's the way that it is. And it's the same with solving certain problems I know I need to do this. Well, all I need for that is a controller, right? Mm-hmm. But you may not know exactly what you need to solve this problem until you actually get down into it and start doing it. And I've seen that's where people can get frustrated or annoyed or whatever, is then they get caught up in the minutia of having to know lots of things that really they shouldn't need to know in order to solve their problem. They should just have a scaffolding that takes care of that stuff for you and give me a place to put my code that does the thing that I need to do, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, with using the scaffolding, you also inherit the style and decisions of the person that created the scaffolding too. So
to an extent, there isn't a whole lot in the plugin factory stuff that is too opinionated. There are a couple of things, like it uses a static variable $ plugin, or for modules $ instance. That's an opinionated thing. But for the most part, everything that is in there is just following the Yi standards. And I'm sorry, if you're writing modules or plugins for Craft, you're writing Yi stuff, you are going to have to follow their opinions. Yep. I mean, just the way it is. So
So
there is a little bit that's opinionated, but not too much that you can do on your own. I don't know. I've just seen so many custom modules with people that have questions and this isn't working. And I don't know. Like, why spend your time doing that?
So Joe, Carbon Joe, says, I agree. He said he usually turns on nearly everything just in case he needs it down the road. Isn't that one of the improvements that you wanted to make to Plugin Factory, right? Where you can just iteratively add on top of an existing module?
So something I've wanted to do for a long time is a context-aware CLI command. Mm-hmm. So think about it like you've got the craft command that is in the base of your repo. Imagine if that was globally available, but you could do something like craft add controller. And based on wherever you were in your directory structure, if you were in somewhere in a custom module, it would add the controller to the module. If you were in a plugin, it would add it to the plugin, that type of thing. And I just think it would be a really neat way if you could work that way. Laravel has something kind of similar that it uses for scaffolding stuff. And I think it would be really nice. You technically can do this now with the plugin factory stuff, but you need to install Node, you need to install Yeoman, and then the syntax is not wonderful. I just, it's a time and space thing, man. If someone wants to pay me a bunch of money to do it, I will do it. But let's put it that way.
All right, we'll put that open bid process.
Or somebody else can write it. I don't care. Like somebody else write it. I will gladly just use it.
I can't remember if Matthew Wilcox said we can call him Matt or not. Do you remember? We'll just call him Matthew. He says, as with any language, there's a difference between practical knowledge and academic. He said PHP docs are fantastic for practical. He said he thinks it's harder to learn Yi than PHP. I mean,
that makes sense.
I mean, especially if you've done something like worked with something like Laravel, I think Yi can be a little strange in naming conventions and things.
I think honestly, frameworks in general.
I think naming conventions are one of the things that can be the most confusing. If you don't take the time just to kind of look it up and say, oh, that's what they mean. It seems like a pretty like complicated word for X.
Yeah, I think frameworks in general take more time to learn than languages do. Because think about it, frameworks are they're built on top of a language and often built on top of other things and services, and they're solving very high level problems, right?
Right.
So it's not the same as, whereas a language, you've got conditional constructs, you've got various libraries that they can use, and it's relatively cut and dry. I'm not saying that you can just pick up a language in a day, but it's relatively cut and dry to learn a new language and the peculiarities of it and that kind of stuff. It'll take a while to get fluent in it and feel comfortable and all that kind of stuff. But learning a framework is more complicated because the problems that it's solving are more complicated. The assumptions it makes are more in depth, and there are opinions involved, and it's a higher level thing. So it totally makes sense to me that it would take longer to learn the framework, regardless of what the framework is. Laravel, Yi, whatever it is, it'll take longer, unless it's a super lightweight framework that doesn't do a whole lot.
Right. Let's see. Matt said that we can call him Matt. That's good. Thanks. I always forget. Carbon Joe said, can you explain when you have to run the autoload dump for Composer? He said he's always struggled with that. Andrew, what's your when do you run it? What's your go-to thing? You probably have it built into a script or something, but.
Yeah, so basically whenever you're adding new classes that PHP might need to know about, or other programs might need to know about, you're going to want to rerun it, because that's essentially what it does. Is it builds a whole map of all of the namespaces, and so as an example, if you're adding a new service class, for instance, you might need to run it. But that actually, no, the reason why you need to run it there is it depends on how you do it. So if you set the services inside of the composer.json, which is originally the way Pixel and Tonic wanted you to do it, if you set the services in there, you need to run the whole composer dump auto load so that the plugin installer runs, so that it generates all of the type hints and everything that are needed for that to happen. But if you just set the services inside of your actual plugin, like if you use the Yi's this set or whatever to set the services, then you don't need to do that. I don't know. I don't think I answered his question very well.
I mean, I think sometimes if for some reason I'm not able to access a class, I'll run it.
Yeah.
But I've always run it if I create a new class file, then I always run it. I think that's pretty much my process.
Just creating a new class file, you shouldn't need to run it. I think it's only for the top level classes that you would need to do that. Because if you already have a namespace established, like let's say you've already got Majingo slash bugs slash whatever,
Right.
anything falling under that namespace, it
It's
still
okay.
should be able to
Oh,
find
okay.
that. Yeah, yeah,
So if I already have a services namespace, then any new service classes I create should be already included.
yeah. And so Joe is saying, I run it when something doesn't seem to work, and that's fine. I mean, that's a totally valid. That's a
Yeah.
totally valid way to approach it. Is just be like, well, I'm just gonna run this thing if stuff doesn't work, and if it fixes it, then it was the right time to run it.
Right. And and you can't hurt anything running it. So, all right, good stuff. So when things aren't working, Andrew, how do we? So there's this thing. I'm trying to think of a good transition. Kind of botched that. When things aren't working, we need to debug a problem. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about debugging and just kind of zoom out, frame it for everyone, and then talk about some of the common ways to debug and maybe some of the more reliable ways to debug. And then also that sometimes using debugging tools like Xdebug, we'll talk about, is also a good way to learn how something works. But as we're talking about writing modules or a plugin, if you're trying to figure out, when does such and such thing happen, or like what, parameters are available to me in an event, then how do I figure that out? Obviously you can look in the docs, but there's nothing more reliable than the code itself. So let's kind of zoom out, talk about what debugging is and what the kind of like a process would look like for that. You want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, debugging, as we kind of hinted at earlier on, is something that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Okay, so if you are developing something on a computer, or actually, you know what? I mean, even in the real world, if you're doing anything, like if something isn't working, when you're trying to figure out what is going on with it, you're debugging it. And actually, before we get into this, I want to start with a little bit of trivia, Ryan.
Okay.
A little bit of trivia.
All right.
Why is it called booting your computer?
Well, is it?
Like,
I mean,
what-
I know there's a
Do we kick
master,
it with a boot?
Well, I know there's a master boot file, but I
Why is
don't
it
know
called
the
that?
origins beyond that.
Yeah. Does anyone in chat have any ideas in terms of why we might? Are we kicking it with boots? Like, why is it called booting a computer? Like
Booting.
what is the reasoning for that?
Boot. Isn't that trunk in like what they call a car trunk in
It
British
is.
English?
So why are we trunking our computers? Okay. It sounds really weird, right?
Yeah. I actually don't know. I don't know the origin of that other than like a master boot file, but I think I might be getting like circular here.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, exactly. So Joe Tunis says bootstrapping. And yes, have you heard the expression picking yourself up by your bootstraps?
By your
Have you heard that?
bootstraps, yeah. Pulling yourself up by bootstraps, yeah.
Or pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of means, originally it meant something else, but now it is morphed into meaning, doing something all by yourself or getting started up all by yourself. And that's what computers do when they first start up. The term started originally being used in the 1950s because when you booted the computer, it pulled itself up by its bootstraps using a wired in program that started the whole startup process, right? And so tied into that, when we're on the history of things, we're debugging stuff, why are they called bugs? Why are they? It's a very strange term to use for logic flaws in the program and stuff that doesn't work.
I assume that back in the day, there actually were physical bugs in like the tape or punch cards. I actually don't know. Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, apparently they actually had bugs that were in the machines that originally I thought that the bugs were like eating the punch cards and stuff like that. But apparently the bugs would just like get in there and they would die and they would short circuit the things and all that kind of stuff. So they would have to and it probably happened like one time that some bug caused it to not work. And from then on, everyone's just like, yeah, whenever it doesn't work, it's a bug. It's not our code. There's a bug that's in there, like some other neutral third party thing that is causing this problem,
Yep.
which I think is hilarious because essentially you're saying if there are bugs in the software, you're saying it's not my fault that it's not working. Like there's
Right.
nothing wrong with my code. There's something
It's
else in there
bugs.
that's causing the
It's
problem. Yeah.
bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think about the big cabinets of tubes and everything in the old computers and how they would just fill up, basements of office buildings where there was a lot of empty space. I'm sure they had a ton of heat to dissipate, and so there's probably a lot of empty space. Now, like, how would a bug ever get in this iMac, right? It seems to like an actual bug.
Yeah. Yeah.
While we're bringing it all back to bugs, I was mentioning about bugs earlier. Yeah. Okay, that's a good bit of trivia.
Right. So, but in debugging stuff, no matter what we're doing, especially if we're writing computer software, we're going to be doing lots of debugging. And the reason is that computer software and the stuff that we're making is complicated. Okay. If we're doing something very simple, like we're putting, two sticks together, there's not much to debug. Either the sticks go together or they don't. Okay. But that's one of the reasons why, we do what is essentially debugging, which is really problem solving or fixing stuff, in the real world, but we do it much, much more involving computers just because of how complicated and how many interactions there are between the things that are going on there. So that's why debugging is such a thing in computers, is that it's really complicated. So when you are frustrated trying to debug something and it's just not working, understand that it's very complicated, right? That's the reason why the whole process of debugging exists as it does on a computer. So just, chill out, take whatever medication you need to take. It's not a big deal. It's part of the process. And believe me, I get frustrated debugging stuff too, right? But everything in the computer is very logical, and using a debugger, we can look at exactly what's going on and try to figure out why our program isn't working the way it is. And when we don't know when something isn't working, it's due to lack of information. Okay, right. That's what it is. And debuggers provide information. That's exactly what they do, is they provide context. They tell you, here's the state, here are what all the variables are, here's all the functions that led up to this, and here's the state. You can now inspect everything, like going into a crime scene and analyzing exactly what's going on. That's what debugging is all about. Debugging is all about gathering information so that you can solve the problem.
Yep. And it helps to do it with like care and some sort of process and organization. So because as the application runs, the thing that you're debugging might be changing, and so you have to, and that's where like step debugging is really helpful, because you can see the state of the application in a moment in time and then stop it and inspect it and then continue on. Because so if a common way to debug that everybody has done is something with like a dump and die or a var dump in PHP. And that's okay, but it definitely it can be kind of tedious, because let's say you're doing like a whole, like a sign up process for a website or something like that. You may have to go through that a dozen times to get the information you need to try to figure out what's happening, like, and move your var dump or your dump and die like through the code to kind of figure out where the problem is. Whereas if you're using a debugger, and for PHP, Xdebug is really the one that everyone uses. For a debugger, especially with step debugging, is you can just set breakpoints, and you can actually dynamically set you can set breakpoints mid debugging session. So then, and you can just have it advance to the next breakpoint, and you can more dynamically investigate what's happening. So you may have to like go through the sign up process a few times, but you in one of those sign up processes, you can kind of see what is happening.
Well, to that point, Ryan, if the reason for bugs or the reason for not understanding why something isn't working is lack of information, when you do something like you just dump a variable,
right,
that's giving you just one tiny piece of information, right? So you're literally dumping that variable. Or if it's an object, you're literally dumping just that object. And it's almost like trying to figure out what is in a scene by peeking through a keyhole, right? Because you're only looking at one tiny little thing, and then you're just like, oh, okay, well, that didn't really help, and then maybe I'll dump something else, and then maybe I'll dump something else, and it just, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're trying to solve anything of any complexity. It just is so much easier. I think one of the reasons why people don't use debuggers is they don't think they're going to need it, and they don't know how to set it up. Once you get it set up, it's a breeze to, instead of just going dump, as to like Luke Kohler was saying, we use dump and die way more often than we should. We should just set a breakpoint in Xdebug. Yeah. And the reason is, you set the breakpoint in Xdebug, you have the entire context at your disposal to look at. You have all of the information there, not just that one little tiny piece that you were dumping and dying. So that what you think is saving you time by just typing like DD and, or var dump or whatever, probably in the end, you're spending more time doing that than you would if you set up Xdebug and you set breakpoints.
Agreed. So I want to show quickly. So I have, I guess I can tease some of my stuff. Is that okay? Is that appropriate?
Do it.
I have a course coming on setting up Xdebug and then learning about step debugging with Xdebug. And I'm going to do it with different local hosting tools, Nitro, DDev. I'll probably do Lando, and then also in PHP Storm and in VS Code. Those are the two that have what I think are the nicest support. So look for that coming soon, but I do want to step through kind of what it's going to, just what a tool like Xdebug in this case, in PHP Storm would look like. So this is, speaking of the module, right? This is just that module class that I'm listening for the event for Before Create subscription as part of Craft Commerce. And I wanted to see, so what I did was I wanted to see like what is actually available with the event. And so I knew like the parameter that I would have to change the value for. Okay, so let me just, this is okay because this is all fake credit cards, so don't worry. I actually want this one.
I'm gonna go buy some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can on your own test Stripe account. So I just click subscribe. I've already created a breakpoint. Oh. Okay, 1 second. Not sure what is not ever creating the subscription. Let me look at something real quick.
Yeah, so Jonathan is saying, for me, it's a setup. Nitro 2, so not sure the setup is better than the previous Nitro. Apparently, Matthew has gotten it set up and running, and I think Ryan has some courses on it. Like there's a command you have to run to turn it on, that type of thing. It's
not difficult. The videos step through it. It's not difficult at all.
Okay.
Let me.
Well, while you're trying to figure this out, Ryan, I'm going to talk about how Xdebug works and how it's a little different than some other debugging systems. So the way Xdebug works is that there's it's an extension for PHP, and it's built into the language. You have to compile it and build it in. Or you can just require the extension in your Docker container, or if you're using Brew, you can Brew install it. Whatever you're using, there's a pretty easy way to get Xdebug installed. Then the way it works that's a little bit unusual is that you would think that your IDE connects to the debugger, but it's the other way around. The debugger, when it sees that it should do something, it actually reaches out and it connects to your IDE. So it goes the other way and it connects to it. And then once it has established a connection, the IDE is then in control of the program that is running on the server. You do need a copy of the source code on the server as well as your local machine, because the IDE will map between what's on the server and what source code is in your local machine, because it's going to show the code in the IDE on your local machine, but then it's going to ask the server for things like what is the contents of this variable, what is the stack trace, set a breakpoint here, all that kind of good stuff. So you can think of your IDE as sort of being a remote control for the program that is running on the server.
Yeah,
We
and I think it's one
making
of the
any
important.
progress?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
working on it still. Sorry, I'm not sure
All right.
what is going on with. It's nothing to do with xdebug.
All
That's
right. Well,
just
I'll keep going then because
yeah.
I got
Keep
more to
going.
say.
Okay.
So the once you have this thing set up, again, the xdebug, if you basically, I think in Nitro 2 there's a command that you run to enable it, and then it will automatically reach out. And if your debugger has, if your IDE has an xdebug extension in it, like PHP Storm, VS Code, any of these things, it will automatically catch that response, and then it will initiate the session, and then you can control it from your IDE. And it's not too difficult to get this up and running, and really, especially because of the way it works, is that it reaches out. And it uses something called the DBGP protocol when it talks to you. And it's actually pretty interesting. I was reading up on it a while ago. So I may be a little bit fuzzy on some of these things, but it actually is sending everything back to the client in XML format for some crazy reason.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, so like when you want to know the contents of an object or something like that, you just you send the command from the IDE. The IDE will do it for you, right? And it sends it to the debug server that's running inside of your server, your local dev environment, and then it will send back the response in XML format, which then your IDE will then parse it and then display it and all that kind of good stuff. But the real benefit of this, as we were talking before, is that you see all the state, and in fact, you can see the call chain. Like, it's really handy. You can see every function it's called a call stack, because anytime a function is called, you can think of it like a stack of paper. It puts on top of that the function that it's called and then the parameters that are sent in. And as the call chain gets deeper and deeper, like the stack gets higher, right? It's a computer science term, the stack, But you can inspect that stack. And not only can you do that, you can go to any one of those call chains and you can inspect all of the variables at any point in that call chain, right? So let's say you're in a function and you're like, oh, well, the problem, I don't think it's really here. You can go back to the previous function that called it, and then you can inspect everything, and then you can trace your way all the way through it, and it's pretty magical in that way. And then you can also do what's called step debugging, and this is really useful for what you were talking about before, Ryan, which is discovery. Like, let's say I've got a craft function that does something. I don't know, maybe it's a add route, and it's not working. So you run it, and it doesn't work. You're like, okay, great. Well, why isn't this working? What you can do is you can hit a breakpoint at that function, and it will stop just before it calls it, and then you can press step into, and then it will run just one line of code, and it will step into the function that you're calling, and then you can just keep on hitting step, and you can see as it's going, you can trace its actual flow piece by piece, line by line, as it's going down through everything, and it's a great way to discover and figure out what's going wrong.
Yep, and I wish that this was working because I had a good example with the event, because you can see the event code happen. You can actually step into it and see it, all the event code, but then you can see where it makes the call out to Stripe and then the response, and then you can inspect all of that as well. But it doesn't seem to be cooperating for some reason. So let's see.
What part of it's not working? And
Well,
what would a live stream be, by the way, with stuff working?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can actually, let me
set a breakpoint somewhere.
Yeah, I'll just set a breakpoint
somewhere. Show
it
working.
That doesn't require all of this.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the breakpoint. Just close this. I just set it on the parent init in the module, and that's gonna trigger pretty quickly. And what I'm doing is I'm listening for PHP debug connections. And this is basically the IDE. So PHP Storm is sitting there on, port 9000, port 9003 is typically what they listen on. And it's just waiting to hear back from the server running xdebug. And once that server since Xdebug is enabled there, once it gets a request, it's going to then call back to PHP Storm, as Andrew said, and says, hey, I'm running, Xdebug is enabled. I have a debugging session. I want to start with you. It sends this a init packet, and then they start communicating. There's some breakpoints are sent back over to Xdebug, and then there's a protocol they communicate on. They have a little secret CIA channel that they talk back and forth on during the debugging session. So,
DBGP.
Yep. The DBGP. And actually,
I'm going to give you the link for that, and I'll put it in chat too. It's actually a whole protocol that's not specific to Xdebug, and it's kind of interesting.
Well, but the co-author of the protocol was the author of Xdebug, though, which is interesting.
Right, but he created it in a generalized manner.
Right.
Which is, and honestly, I don't know that anybody else even uses it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's true. All right, so I got that going. Should trigger. Oh, I know what I did. So, as Andrew had said that I just have ddev running here. So I think it's ddev.
Yeah, ddev very similar to Nitro in that there's a command to tell
right.
To tell it to use the debugger. Yeah.
Yep. So it's ddev debug enable.
And I do it a different way with my Docker setup, where there's just
right.
a Chrome extension, and you just click the thing, and it works that way. But it's two different ways to accomplish the same thing. Is essentially what it is. It doesn't like it.
What is happening?
I don't know.
A collection of debugging commands. Oh, I'm sorry. Ddev xdebug enable. There we are. So now it's enabled. So now I have this breakpoint set. I know this module is going to get loaded because I have it included in the bootstrap here.
Is your little telephone icon on? I can't.
The telephone icon is on and listening.
Okay, good.
And so now if I reload, bam. So it automatically brings up PHP Storm at this point where, I mean, this isn't the most useful place to set a breakpoint, but you can just
expand the pane on the left, though?
I'm sorry?
Expand the call chain pane on the left. It's all scrunched over. See that? Yeah, that's the call chain right there. Yeah, there we go. There we go.
So yeah, so this is the call chain. So you can actually go all the way back. And this is helpful for understanding what Craft does when you load a page. This goes all the way back to the index.php file. And you can actually step through what Craft is doing every time it accepts a request and spins up the application. Here's like all the bootstrap stuff. Now it's loading application, goes into module. Now it's loading my module. Doing some Yi stuff. I don't know exactly what all this is. But then it ends up here at parent init for the module. And at this point, I have now access to all the variables. This is this, and I can see, things about, that's referring to the module, and I can see things about the module. I also have,
not just that, you can edit those variables too.
Yeah, right. I can edit these, so I can go in and
change that to CraftQuest Peggy or something.
So I can set the value here to something else.
Yeah.
Okay, it won't let me modify it. Interesting. Now, what's really helpful here is adding things to watches. So that basically means you can, my panes are all kind of messed up here. Let me move that over. So you can add things, so you can watch this variable as well and the value of it as you step through. Because a lot of times we're trying to understand when something changed because it's not, the output we're getting isn't what we expect. So you can watch those.
So what does watching it do, Ryan? What exactly does watching a variable do?
Well, I believe that it lists here it updates it as the variable changes. So you're always seeing this, the current state of it.
And you can also set it to break when the variable changes as well.
Right.
And that, I think, is where it becomes the most useful.
Yep. So there's not a lot going on here, but you can also, so one thing I do a lot is, Andrew was talking about stepping into and out of. So you can step into when you're debugging. So now we're stepping into the init method, and we can start to see what's going on there. I can step back out of it as well and come back. There's not a lot going on here in we're not triggering this event, so that code is not going to get executed at all. I don't know, will event on, it won't get executed. So one of the things that I also like is in the console, like I can interact with like a variable as well. You can output it here if you wanted to. You can update it. You can run some code if you needed to test something out. I use run to cursor a lot if I'm just really kind of poking around to see what's happening. I'll just run to the cursor. I can't run to you can't really run to like a blank line.
Yeah, you can do step over, which is it'll one by one will execute the command but not go into any functions that are called.
Right.
You can use step into if you want it to go into the function that is called, or you can do run to cursor, where it'll just run from wherever it stops to wherever the cursor happens to be. What I wanted to show people is if you right click on that right-click on that breakpoint. Look at that. So you can add conditions there that you can say this breakpoint should only happen if a certain thing is true.
Right.
And you can just write whatever conditional stuff you need there. Super handy when you're debugging something that it only happens at the 100th time through the loop or something like that. You know what I mean? Or it only happens when this particular value is set on something. Like conditionals in breakpoints are super, super nice.
Right. So the example I wanted to show, which for some reason I'm having issues in this local copy with a test subscription going through. But what I actually did, this morning I posted a new video about creating trials or setting up trials for subscriptions in Craft Commerce. And one of the things I did in that video, so if you're a subscriber, you can go watch, or you can sign up for a free trial and watch, is I wanted to know what is available via event when I'm inside of a create subscription event, because I wanted to know, like, what do I have available to me? What is the parameter that I have to set the trial days? And so I use the step debugging as a learning tool, not a debugging tool at that point. I was trying to learn from it to understand what the state of the application is and actually what is happening and what's available via event. Now you can look this up in a class reference. There's not a ton of documentation on trials for commerce, but there's other ways. But there's no better way than setting those breakpoints and just saying, oh, like it's event parameters trial days is what commerce is expecting, and then you know that it's that you can set it to whatever you need to set it, and then it should work. And then at the same time, if you actually go into the event and you watch the full execution of the event and it's setting the trial, then you can actually go see, and you can go into the commerce, to the Stripe gateway and see how it communicates back with Stripe and what the response is to confirm that I'm setting trial days of 3. And I know that Stripe is not only getting that, but it's responding with some JSON saying, or an object saying that it has, the trial days of 3. So you can confirm that it's working. So debugging it's kind of shining a light on the whole execution process of the application. Yeah. Super helpful.
Again, like I mentioned before, it's gathering information, right?
Yep.
So when you're trying to solve a problem, the easiest way to solve it is by having all of the information at your fingertips. And that's what a debugger does for you. That is literally its job, is to inspect the state of the app and to give you all the info so you can use your big brain and solve the problem. And I guess that would be my closing message to you, is that if you do any amount of work in PHP, or even in JavaScript or other languages, get familiar with a debugger, whatever it is, and use it, because I think that you will save time in the end over just using a dump. I think that you will save your sanity, and you'll save a whole bunch of time if you get the tool set up, get familiar with it. And I think you'd be shocked at how quickly you're able to solve things that before you might have been, banging your head into the monitor for hours trying to figure out.
Yep. And the place where like a dump falls apart is when you're having to do like some sort of routine, like sign up, registration, things like that, where you're having to do it over and over again. Where if you did have a debugging tool set up, you might have to do it a few times, like as you're trying to figure it out, but you don't have to do it as much because you're not getting just one point in time of the value of, let's say, of some variable. You're getting, you're able to step through and see it. And so it's way, way easier.
I remember when we were kids, we used to play a game where everyone would be sitting in a dark room. No, it's not spin the bottle, Ryan. Take it easy. Chill out. And you would have like an object that they would hand you in like in a bag or something like that. And you put your hands in there and you're allowed to kind of touch it to try, and you're trying to figure out what it is just by touching it. You know what I mean? Whereas if you just turn the light on, you would instantly know what it is, right? So that's the difference between using a debugger and not.
Right.
If you're not using a debugger, you're kind of just fumbling around in the dark trying to figure out what's going on. The debugger lets you turn the lights on, instantly see what it is, and make it easier to figure out.
Yep. So I have a ton more information on debugging coming really, really soon, including a way to interactively debug and remove bugs in a software and buggy way. And then also, if you want to see kind of some of the step debugging in a video that I have right now, you can check out this is the adding trials to subscriptions in craft commerce. This is under lessons. And I do walk through some step debugging in that if you want to look at something that's live right now. But check in the next week or two for the debugging course. It's going to have setup information for the different local hosting environments for VS Code and for PHP Storm, and then step debugging. There'll be a plugin that you can install to help you learn how to debug. And so check that out. All right, Andrew. Any parting thoughts? I haven't actually looked at the comments, so I should probably check in and see what's happening there.
Joe was just saying that it's like he was about to say, it's just like someone turned on a bunch of lights in the dark room. Yeah.
Yep.
And sure, it takes a little bit of work to get the lights set up so they're in the room, but once you have them in the room, it just makes it so much easier. So yeah, I do think that the biggest hurdle here is people just getting it set up so that it works.
Yeah.
Because then once it's set up and it works, it's really easy to just use it when you need it.
Right.
But I think that is the biggest hurdle, and that's why I think it makes sense to sell people on the awesome things you can do with it so that they're then motivated to do the work that it takes to set it up. And it honestly isn't that bad.
It's not that bad. If you're using like PHP Storm, VS Code, and a DDev, where they already have it, you just have to enable it, then it's really not that bad. Matt had mentioned that the most confusing bit was setting up Chrome, Firefox to work with Xdebug. I bypassed that completely. I know, Andrew, you have it with yours because you're sending the request to different containers, right? In your Docker setup, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I bypassed that completely, and actually was talking to you about it, Andrew, that it seems like there's a camp where they just say, don't even, just leave it run and then set a breakpoint. And like, listen in PHP Storm, set a breakpoint. Don't bother with toggling things on and off. Just let Xdebug run all the time. Apparently, Xdebug 3, which is what Nitro 2 has, and DDev, is way faster than Xdebug 2 was. And so it actually should be okay to run all the time. but that can also depend. Like I notice on my iMac, it's fine. On my laptop, it can be a little bit slower. But
the only question I would have then is that due to the nature of the way that Xdebug works, and yes, the way that I do it is I have two separate containers. One runs just PHP, and the other one runs PHP with Xdebug enabled. And whether the cookie is set via that little browser extension determines which container it routes to. So you automatically get the speed of it when you're not debugging. And then when you're debugging, it automatically is just there. There's nothing to change, nothing to spin up. Like it just works. The only thing it is true that Xdebug 3 is significantly faster. One of the reasons why you wouldn't historically want to keep Xdebug on is it made things significantly slower with Xdebug 2, like, significantly. Xdebug 3, less so. There still is some overhead. The only thing I would question is, due to the nature of the way it works, when it initially does that little probe to say, hey, is there anyone listening to me? I know it has to pause the program before it will do anything because it's got to wait for that connection to come back. And if I don't know if there's a little bit of an overhead, there must be, I would think, Yeah,
you would think. I mean, there is a point where basically when it gets that request from the browser and Xdebug's enabled, it halts all execution and then calls back. So there is but I haven't noticed it being anything that would, I mean, I didn't even notice it, the speed of it at all. But it's just me.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So that's kind of a primer, I guess, on Xdebug and debugging. So it's not only for solving problems, and finding out what's wrong with your code, but it's also a great way to learn how someone else's code works, and it's a great way to investigate if you're having to implement something like with an event, or even understand like how a certain part of Craft or somebody's plugin works. Set a breakpoint and just kind of step through, and will show you every single way. Matt says he's accidentally left debugging on and not noticed. Yeah, I leave it actually on all the time. All right.
Yeah, if it was Xdebug 2, you would not be doing that. I guarantee you.
Would definitely notice it.
You would not be doing that. Yeah.
Right. All right, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. So, Andrew, we're not going to have a live stream in 2 weeks. So
why, Ryan? Why?
Well, I'm gonna be not here. So I guess we'll be back in the beginning of August. How's that sound?
I mean, you're the boss, man. I gotta do what you say. I'm your humble servant, Ryan.
So we'd be back on the 5th of August. That's a good day. Isn't that your birthday? 5th of August?
You're so far off, it's insulting.
Okay. Oh. It was worth a guess. It's somebody's birthday, that's for sure.
Of course it's somebody's birthday, Ryan. It's silly.
Every day is somebody's birthday, right? Jonathan, thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks everyone for joining us on the live stream. We will see you on the next one, which is just check craftquest.io/livestreams, but we should be back on August 5th, and we'll talk to you then. Andrew, thanks very much, as always.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Next time, please try and dress.
Yes,
and,
I'll be
groom
appropriately
and
for
the live stream.
I promise.
Thank you.
All right, see you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.